There are moments in life when the world simply stops spinning, when time freezes and everything you thought you knew gets turned upside down in the blink of an eye. For Silas Boone, that moment came on a dry Wyoming morning in 1873, when a dust-covered rider handed him a letter written in handwriting he had not seen in 5 long years. Jeremiah Walsh, his oldest and truest friend from the dark days of war. Silas stood in the doorway of his lonely ranch house, the wind pulling at his worn cotton shirt, the sun burning down on the empty prairie that stretched out in every direction as far as the eye could see. He broke the wax seal with stiff, calloused fingers, his heart beating slow and steady like always. He had learned long ago not to let hope get the better of him. Hope was dangerous for a man like him, but the message inside that letter would change the course of his entire life. Jeremiah had sent him a bride, not some desperate stranger from back east looking for any warm body with a roof over his head, not some city girl who would crumble at the first sign of hardship or run screaming at the sight of his scarred face, but a young woman named Clara Henderson, 23 years old, educated and refined, quiet as a church mouse, and in desperate need of safety. If Silas agreed to take her in, she would arrive on the 15th of the month, just 12 days away. Silas lowered the letter and stared at the horizon for a long, long time. The wind whispered through the tall prairie grass like it was trying to tell him something. A hawk circled lazy overhead, riding the warm currents of air. And somewhere deep inside his scarred and battle-worn heart, something stirred that he had not felt in many years. Hope. That dangerous, treacherous thing. Silas Boone was 35 years old. He carried scars from the Comanche Wars that ran across his back like a map of suffering, each one a reminder of the 2 years he spent as their captive before he finally escaped. He had memories from his bounty hunting days that still woke him up screaming in the dead of night. Memories of men he had killed and men who had tried to kill him. And he had a ranch that was barely held together with spit and prayers after his mother passed away 2 months ago. His mother, God rest her soul, she had been the only soft thing left in his life, the only person who looked at him and saw something more than a killer. She had spent her final weeks begging him to find a wife, to build a family, to fill this lonely house with laughter and love before it was too late. "I do not want you to die alone, Silas," she had whispered, her hand thin and fragile in his. "Promise me you will try." He had promised. He had held her hand and looked into her fading eyes and promised her anything she asked. But deep down, he never truly believed any woman would want a man like him, a man with a face like thunder and a past written in blood. For years, he had believed his chance at love and companionship was long gone. A man like him did not deserve soft things. A man like him did not get to hold a woman close at night and feel her heart beat against his chest. A man like him was meant to live alone, work the land until his bones gave out, and die forgotten under the Wyoming sky. But the simple truth was this: he was tired. Bone deep, soul-crushing, tired. Tired of the silence that filled every room of the house like a physical weight. Tired of cooking meals for one and eating them standing up at the counter because sitting at the empty table hurt too much. Tired of waking up in the darkness and reaching across the bed for someone who was not there. Tired of talking to his horse just to hear a voice, even if it was only his own. Tired of living with ghosts who never answered back. Now Jeremiah had given him a chance. A real honest-to-God chance at something different. Silas read the letter 3 more times, standing there in the doorway while the wind tried to snatch the paper from his hands. Each time he read it, he noticed something new. The way Jeremiah described Clara as quiet but surprisingly strong. The careful mention that she needed safety above all else. That word underlined twice. The gentle warning that she carried wounds that ran deeper than the eye could see, wounds that had nothing to do with flesh and bone. Silas understood wounds. He understood them better than most men alive. He walked back into the house and sat down at his mother's old writing desk by the window. The wood was worn smooth from years of use, and sometimes he swore he could still smell her lavender perfume lingering in the grain. He pulled out a piece of paper, dipped his pen in the inkwell, and wrote a simple reply. "Send her. I will take care of her. I give you my word." And he sealed the letter with a drop of red wax and rode into town that very afternoon to post it. The whole ride there and back, his heart pounded against his ribs like a war drum. What in God's name had he just done? What if this Clara Henderson took one look at his scarred face and ran screaming back to the stagecoach? What if she hated the isolation of ranch life, the endless prairie, the nearest neighbor 10 miles away? What if he could not be the man she needed, could not give her whatever it was she was running from? But there was no taking it back now. The letter was sent. The die was cast. All he could do was wait. 5 days later, Clara Henderson arrived in Willow Creek. The stagecoach rattled into the station just after noon, kicking up a cloud of dust that hung in the still air like fog. Silas had been waiting since before dawn, too nervous to sit still, pacing back and forth until the station master told him he was wearing a groove in the wooden boards. He had changed his shirt 3 times that morning. He had shaved twice, nicking his chin both times. He had even trimmed his dark hair, which normally grew wild as prairie grass because he never saw the point in taming it. He had polished his boots and brushed his hat and done everything he could think of to look like a respectable man instead of the rough creature he knew himself to be. When the coach door finally opened, his breath caught in his throat like he had been punched. Clara Henderson stepped out carefully, one small hand gripping the doorframe for balance. She was holding a carpet bag that seemed to contain everything she owned in this entire world. She was pale and thin, too thin, like she had not eaten a proper meal in months. Beautiful in a quiet and fragile way that made something twist painfully in Silas's chest. Her eyes were the color of a summer sky, clear and bluey and deep, but they held far too many shadows for someone her age. Far too much pain, far too much fear. She moved carefully, almost timidly, like she expected the world to punish her for breathing too loudly. Like she was trying to make herself as small and invisible as possible. Like she had learned the hard way what happened to women who took up too much space. She wore a simple gray dress that had been mended many times, the stitches neat and careful but obvious if you knew where to look. Her brown hair was pinned up beneath a bonnet that had seen better days, probably years ago. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked around the dusty station, searching for a face she had never seen before. Silas stepped forward before he could talk himself out of it. His voice came out rough as gravel, rougher than he intended. "You, Clara Henderson?" She turned toward him slowly. Her blue eyes traveled from his worn boots up his long legs, across his broad chest, and finally to his weathered face. She took in the scar that ran from his left eyebrow down to his jaw, the mark left by a Comanche knife during his escape. She saw the hard lines around his mouth, the permanent furrow between his brows, the darkness that lived in his eyes and never quite went away. For one terrible, endless moment, Silas was absolutely certain she would turn on her heel and demand to be put back on the next coach heading east. He braced himself for it, prepared himself for the rejection he had known was coming and all along. But Clara Henderson did not run. Instead, she lifted her chin just slightly, squared her narrow shoulders, and spoke a single word in a voice barely above a whisper. Yes. That one small word hit Silas like a fist to the chest. There was something in her voice that he recognized, something that spoke to the broken places inside him, something wounded and wary but also determined, stubborn, brave. This woman had survived things that would have destroyed lesser souls. He could see it in the set of her jaw, in the steel behind her frightened eyes. She was terrified, yes, but she was still standing, still fighting, still refusing to give up. Silas respected that more than he could say. He reached for her carpet bag with slow, careful hands, making sure she could see the movement coming. She flinched slightly anyway, an instinctive reaction that made his jaw tighten with anger at whoever had taught her to be afraid. Then she caught herself and allowed him to take the bag from her trembling fingers. The bag weighed almost nothing. A few clothes, maybe. A book or two. Whatever life she was leaving behind, she was not bringing much of it with her. "The wagon is this way," Silas said quietly, gesturing toward the dusty street. "It is about a 2-hour ride to the ranch. You can rest if you need to." Clara nodded silently. She did not ask questions. She did not make small talk. She did not cry or complain or demand anything at all. She simply followed him to the wagon and allowed him to help her up onto the seat. When his hand touched hers to steady her as she climbed up, she went rigid as a fence post. Every muscle in her body tensed. Her breath stopped in her throat. Her eyes went distant, like she was somewhere else entirely. Silas noticed. He always noticed things like that. It was what had kept him alive during the wars, that ability to read people, to sense danger before it arrived. Someone had hurt this woman, hurt her badly and often. And Silas made a silent promise to himself right then and there, standing in the dusty street with the sun beating down on his shoulders. He would never be another source of pain in her life. Never. He would die first. The ride back to the ranch was long and mostly silent. The prairie stretched out around them like a golden ocean, endless waves of grass rolling toward the distant mountains. The sky was that particular shade of blue that only existed in Wyoming, so bright it almost hurt to look at. Clara sat straight as a board on the wagon seat, her hands folded tight in her lap. Her knuckles were white from gripping so hard. She stared straight ahead at the empty horizon, but Silas could tell she was not really seeing it. Her mind was somewhere else, somewhere dark. He tried not to stare at her, but he could not help noticing things. How she flinched at every loud noise, whether it was a bird taking flight or a branch cracking under the wagon wheels. How she held her breath whenever he shifted on the seat beside her, like she was bracing for a blow. How she kept her feet tucked close together, her elbows pressed against her sides, her whole body contracted into the smallest possible space, like she was used to making herself invisible, like she was used to staying out of someone's way. After about an hour of silence, Silas finally spoke. "Jeremiah said you needed a fresh start." Clara's answer came quick and sharp, like a door slamming shut. "Yes." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with things unsaid. Silas nodded slowly and did not push for more. He could tell she was not ready to share her story, and truthfully, he was not entirely sure he was ready to hear it. Some pain was too fresh to speak aloud. Some wounds needed time before they could be examined. They rode on in companionable silence as the sun began its slow descent toward the western mountains. The prairie grass turned golden in the fading light, then amber, then deep orange. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled its lonely song, and another answered from miles away. Clara did not seem frightened by the sound. If anything, she seemed to relax slightly, her shoulders dropping a fraction of an inch. Maybe she found comfort in the wildness of this place. Maybe she understood that out here, there were no locked doors or dark hallways or footsteps in the night. Out here, she could breathe. When they finally crested the last hill and the ranch came into view below them, Silas pulled the wagon to a stop so Clara could take it in. The house was not grand by any stretch of the imagination. It was built of sturdy logs that Silas's father had cut and fitted himself 40 years ago, back when this land was still wild and dangerous. A stone chimney rose from the center of the roof, already starting to smoke as the evening grew cool. There was a wide front porch where his mother used to sit in her rocking chair on summer evenings, watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. The barn stood solid and weathered about 50 yards away, home to 4 horses, a milk cow, and more barn cats than Silas could count. Beyond that, fields stretched in every direction, some planted with winter wheat, others left to pasture for the cattle that dotted the distant hills like brown and white specks. It was not much, but it was honest. It was his. And now, maybe it could be hers too. Clara studied the property with careful, measuring eyes. Silas watched her face, trying to read her reaction, but she gave nothing away. She noticed the weeds choking the garden by the kitchen door, the one his mother had tended so lovingly for decades. She saw the laundry still hanging on the line from days ago, stiff and forgotten because Silas could not bring himself to touch his mother's things. She spotted the broken shutter on the front window, the one he kept meaning to fix but somehow never got around to. She did not say anything. But Silas saw the way her jaw tightened, not with judgment or disappointment, with something else. Determination. "My mother passed 2 months ago," he said quietly, feeling the need to explain. "I have not kept things up the way I should. The house needs a woman's touch." Clara turned to look at him for the first time since they left town. For just a moment, the walls behind her eyes came down, and he saw something raw and real there. Understanding. Compassion. "I am sorry for your loss," she said softly, and he could tell she meant every word. They pulled up in front of the house and Silas climbed down first, then turned to help Clara from the wagon. This time when he offered his hand, she hesitated only briefly before taking it. Her fingers were cold and small in his rough palm. Progress, he thought. Small, careful progress. Inside, the house was dim and dusty, full of shadows that seemed to hold their breath as Clara stepped through the door. She paused on the threshold, her eyes adjusting to the low light, her heart beating fast against her ribs. For 7 years, crossing a threshold had meant entering a prison. It had meant locked doors and heavy footsteps and hands that grabbed without warning. It had meant making herself small and silent and invisible, praying that tonight would not be one of the bad nights. But this threshold felt different. The air smelled like wood smoke and dried herbs, with a faint undertone of dust and neglect. Afternoon light filtered through the windows, catching motes of dust that danced in the golden beams. The main room was large and comfortable, with a massive stone fireplace along one wall and a dining table built to seat 6 people. Everything showed the signs of a house that had lost its caretaker. Dishes were piled in the basin by the pump, crusted with old food. Cobwebs hung in the corners, swaying gently in the draft from the open door. Dust coated every surface, thick enough to write your name in. But beneath the neglect, Clara could see the bones of a well-loved home. Her eyes went straight to the little touches that showed a woman's careful hand. Old quilts in faded but pretty patterns draped over the backs of chairs. Jars of dried herbs lined up on the windowsill, their labels written in graceful feminine script. Bible verses copied onto scraps of paper and tucked into picture frames. A half-finished embroidery sampler laid aside on a side table, the needle still threaded. This house had known love, real love, the kind Clara had only read about in books. Something in her chest loosened, just a little, just enough to let her breathe. Silas moved past her into the room, suddenly awkward in a way he had not been on the long wagon ride. He ran a hand through his dark hair, messing up what he had so carefully combed. "I apologize for the state of things," he said gruffly. "I am not much of a housekeeper. My mother did all of that, and since she passed, I have not had the heart to keep up with it. There is no need to apologize." Clara's voice came out stronger than she expected. "You have been grieving." Silas looked at her sharply, like he was not used to people understanding such things. Then he nodded once and continued with the tour. "This is the main room. Kitchen is through there." He pointed to an archway that led to a smaller room with a cook stove and shelves of supplies. "Privy is out back. There is a pump inside for water, which is a luxury my father was mighty proud of when he installed it." Clara followed him as he showed her the rest of the small house. A narrow hallway led to 3 doors. One was a storage room filled with tools and supplies. One was a small bedroom with a narrow bed and a window facing east. The third door Silas opened with visible reluctance. "This was my mother's room," he said quietly. "It is the biggest of the bedrooms, and it has the best light. You should take it." Clara looked past him into the room, a large bed covered with a beautiful patchwork quilt, a dresser with a mirror above it, curtains in a cheerful yellow print, a braided rug on the wooden floor. Everything was dusty and undisturbed, exactly as his mother had left it. She shook her head quickly. "I could not possibly. This room should be yours. I am a stranger here. I have no right to such a space." Silas turned to face her fully. His dark eyes were serious and steady, holding hers without wavering. "You are not a stranger," he said firmly but gently. "You are my wife. Or you will be once the preacher comes through next month. This is your home now, and you will need privacy. A space of your own where you can close the door and feel safe." That word again, safe. Jeremiah had used it in his letter. Now Silas was using it too, like they both understood something about her that she had never put into words. Clara felt her eyes sting with sudden tears. She blinked them back fiercely, refusing to cry in front of this stranger who was showing her more kindness than anyone had shown her in years. "All right," she whispered. "Thank you." Silas nodded like the matter was settled. "I will use the small room. It is plenty big enough for me. I have slept in worse places." He showed her where to find extra blankets, where the wood was stacked for the fire, how to work the temperamental pump in the kitchen. He spoke in short, simple sentences, never using 2 words when one would do. But there was nothing cold or unfriendly about his manner. He was just a man who had spent too many years alone, who had forgotten how to make conversation. Clara understood that better than he could know. When the tour was finished, Silas excused himself to see to the horses and the evening chores. Clara watched through the window as he walked toward the barn, his long stride eating up the ground. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders. the careful way he held himself. He was nervous too, she realized. Nervous about her, about this strange arrangement, about whether he was doing the right thing. The thought was oddly comforting. Clara turned back to the house and rolled up her sleeves. She might be a guest here, but she would not be a burden. She would earn her keep the only way she knew how. She started with the dishes. The water from the pump was cold, but she heated some on the stove and scrubbed each plate and cup until they sparkled. Then she tackled the floor, sweeping out the accumulated dust and debris until the wooden boards showed their true golden color. The work was familiar, almost soothing. Her hands knew what to do without her mind having to think about it. That was good. It kept the memories at bay. By the time Silas returned from the barn, the kitchen was clean and a pot of beans was simmering on the stove. Clara had found some salt pork in the cold cellar and onions in a basket by the door. It was a simple meal, but it was hot and filling. Silas stopped in the doorway, his eyes wide with surprise. "You did not have to do all this," he said. "You must be exhausted from your journey." "I wanted to." Clara kept her eyes on the pot, stirring it carefully. "I am not used to sitting idle." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat down at the table and waited while she ladled the beans into two bowls. They ate in silence. But it was a different kind of silence than the wagon ride. This silence was comfortable, almost peaceful. Two strangers beginning to learn each other's rhythms. When Silas finished his second bowl, he looked up at her with something like wonder in his dark eyes. "This is real fine cooking," he said honestly. "Best meal I have had since Ma passed." "Maybe better." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It is nothing special, just beans. My mother always said there is an art to making simple things taste good. You have that art." She did not know how to respond to the compliment. In her previous life, kind words had always been followed by cruel ones, a honeyed trap before the punishment came. But Silas just pushed back from the table and carried his bowl to the basin. "I will wash up," he said. "You have done enough for one day." Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her bones. The journey had been long, and the fear had been exhausting in its own way. After supper, she retreated to her new room with a soft good night. She could feel Silas's eyes on her as she walked down the hall, but he made no move to follow. He made no demands. He did not even hint that he expected anything from her. She closed the door behind her and stood for a moment with her back pressed against the solid wood. Her heart was racing, but not from fear, from something else, something she could not quite name. The room was beautiful in the fading evening light. She could see where dust had collected on the dresser, but beneath it the wood was polished smooth from years of loving care. The quilt on the bed was made of 100 different fabric scraps, each one chosen and stitched with intention. The curtains moved gently in the breeze from the slightly open window. A woman had lived here. A good woman. A woman who had been loved and who had loved in return. Clara changed into her nightgown with trembling hands. The fabric was thin and worn, one of only two she owned, but it was clean and soft against her skin. She climbed into the big bed and pulled the quilt up to her chin. The mattress was stuffed with feathers, softer than anything she had slept on in years. The sheets smelled faintly of lavender, a scent that must have been his mother's. She lay there in the darkness, waiting for sleep to come. But her ears were straining for sounds she dreaded. Footsteps in the hallway. The creak of a door opening. Heavy breathing in the dark. Instead, she heard something that made her throat tighten with emotion. The front door opened and closed. Footsteps crossed the porch. And then silence. Clara crept to the window and looked out into the night. Silas Boone was walking toward the barn, a blanket tucked under his arm. As she watched, he disappeared inside, and a moment later a soft glow of lantern light appeared in the small window. He was not sleeping in the house. He was giving her the entire building to herself. He was spending the night on a cold, hard barn floor so that she could feel safe in her own room. Clara pressed her hand to her mouth to hold back the sob that wanted to escape. No one had ever done anything like that for her. No one had ever put her comfort above their own. No one had ever understood without being told that she needed space, needed time, needed to know that she could close a door and have it stay closed. She stood at that window for a long time, watching the lantern light flicker in the barn. The wind whispered against the glass. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. And somewhere deep inside her chest, in a place she thought had died years ago, Something began to wake up. She climbed back into bed with tears streaming down her face. But they were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of something else entirely. Relief, gratitude, and the first tiny, fragile bud of hope. She made herself a promise in the darkness. She would work hard. She would be useful. She would cause no trouble and make no demands. She would earn her place in this house through sweat and labor, and she would never, ever give Silas Boone a reason to regret taking her in. She did not know that before the week was out, he would learn a secret she had spent years hiding, a secret that would leave his hands shaking until dawn. But that was a story for another day. For now, Clara Henderson closed her eyes and slept without fear for the first time in 7 long years. The next 3 days passed in a rhythm that began to feel almost natural. Clara woke before dawn each morning, her eyes snapping open in the gray half-light, her body tense with the old, familiar readiness. For a few heartbeats, she would not know where she was. Her mind would reach for the dread, the fear, the heavy weight of knowing what the day would bring. Then memory would return, the stagecoach. The scarred rancher with the gentle hands, the lonely house on the prairie where no one shouted, no one struck, no one came to her door in the dark of night. She would lie there for a moment, letting the relief wash over her like warm water. Then she would rise and begin her day. She cooked breakfast while Silas was still doing the morning chores. Eggs from the chickens, biscuits from flour and lard, coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. She set the table carefully, making sure everything was in its proper place, making sure she had earned her keep before he even walked through the door. Silas ate everything she put in front of him and asked for seconds. He complimented her cooking in his rough, awkward way, and each kind word made something warm bloom in her chest. After breakfast, he would head out to work the cattle or mend fences or do the 100 other tasks that kept a ranch running. Clara would clean and organize and explore the house, learning its secrets, making it her own. She found a rhythm to the work that was almost meditative. Sweep the floors, beat the rugs, wash the windows that had not been touched in months, scrub the pots until they shone, mend the holes in the curtains with tiny, careful stitches. The house responded to her attention like a living thing. As she cleaned away the dust and neglect, she could almost feel it breathing easier. The rooms grew brighter, the air grew fresher. The ghost of Silas's mother seemed to smile down from the picture frames. In the afternoons, Clara worked in the garden. It had been badly neglected since his mother's death, the beds choked with weeds, the soil dry and hard. But beneath the neglect, she could see the bones of something beautiful. Neat rows where vegetables had grown, trellises for climbing beans, a small herb garden near the kitchen door, the plants struggling but not yet dead. She threw herself into the work with a desperation that surprised her, pulling weeds until her back ached and her hands were raw, turning the soil with a rusty spade she found in the barn, watering each struggling plant like it was a precious child. She did not fully understand why the garden mattered so much to her. Maybe it was because these plants had been loved by a woman who was now gone. Maybe it was because tending growing things made her feel less broken inside. Maybe it was simply that she needed something to nurture, something that depended on her, something that could not hurt her back. On the third day, everything changed. It happened in the garden, just as the afternoon sun reached its peak. Clara had been working since morning, pulling weeds and preparing a bed for winter planting. The sun beat down warm on her skin. The wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain. Sweat dampened her dress and made her hair stick to her forehead. She felt almost peaceful, almost hopeful, almost like a normal woman living a normal life. Then the world tilted sideways without warning. A wave of dizziness slammed into her like a physical blow. Her vision blurred. Stars exploded across her field of sight. Her legs turned to water beneath her. Not now, she thought desperately. Please, God, not here. But her body did not listen to her prayers. Her knees buckled. The sky spun overhead like a child's top. The hard, packed dirt of the garden rose up to meet her face. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was the wind rushing through the tall prairie grass, whispering secrets she could not understand. When consciousness returned, she was being carried. Strong arms wrapped around her body, the smell of horse and leather and clean male sweat, a deep voice saying her name over and over, rough with fear. Clara, Clara, can you hear me? Stay with me. I have got you. You are safe. Panic exploded through her like wildfire. A man's hands on her body, the helplessness of being held against her will, the darkness pressing in, the memories clawing their way up from the place where she had buried them. The locked room, the heavy footsteps in the hallway, the creak of the door opening, the weight pressing down on her, crushing the air from her lungs, crushing the hope from her soul. She thrashed against his grip, weak as a kitten, but desperate as a wild animal. No, she gasped. No, please, please do not. I will be good. I promise I will be good. Silas stopped moving instantly. He did not tighten his hold on her. He did not snap at her to calm down or stop making a scene. He did not force her to submit to his will. He simply lowered her to the ground, stepped back 3 full paces, and raised his hands where she could see them. Palms out. No threat. No danger. Clara. His voice was soft as warm earth, steady as bedrock. Clara, you fainted in the garden. I found you on the ground and I carried you inside. But I am not touching you now. I am not going to hurt you. You are safe with them. Look at me. She blinked hard, trying to force the world back into focus. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her hands shook like leaves in a storm. Slowly, the present reasserted itself over the past. She was sitting on a chair in the kitchen of the ranch house. Sunlight streamed through the clean windows she had washed just yesterday. The smell of the beans she had left simmering on the stove filled the air. And Silas Boone stood 6 feet away from her, his scarred face creased with worry, but his hands raised in surrender. Not angry, not disgusted, not cold with that terrible disappointment she had come to know so well. Just worried, just scared for her. Shame flooded through Clara like hot water. She had panicked like a frightened child. She had accused him in her terror of being like the monster she had escaped. I am sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking. I am so sorry. I did not mean to react like that. It was not about you. It was the memory. I was somewhere else. Silas shook his head slowly. His hands lowered, but he made no move to come closer. You do not have to apologize to me, Clara. Not ever. Not for something like this. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Whatever happened to you before, whatever made you fear a man's touch that way, it was not your fault. And it is over now. Clara stared at him. She had expected anger. She had expected disgust. She had expected him to demand an explanation or accuse her of being crazy or broken or too much trouble. She had not expected understanding. Can you tell me what happened? Silas asked gently. Out in the garden, I mean. 1 minute you were working, and the next you were on the ground. Clara swallowed hard. Her throat was dry as dust. I have these spells, she said slowly. They come and go without warning. Dizziness, fainting. Sometimes my heart races for no reason. It has been happening for years. Did you see a doctor about it? I never had money for a doctor. Silas nodded like that made perfect sense to him. On the frontier, doctors were a luxury most folks could not afford. Your husband, he said carefully, watching her face. Did he know about the spells? Clara looked away. She could not meet his eyes, could not let him see the truth that lived there. He knew, she whispered. And, Silas prompted gently. The single word hung in the air between them, heavy with all the things she could not say. Clara closed her eyes. She felt tears leaking down her cheeks, but she was too tired to wipe them away. He said it was my fault, that I was weak, that I was worthless, that no one else would ever want me. He said a lot of things. Silas was silent for a long moment. When Clara opened her eyes again, she saw that his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. His jaw was tight. A muscle twitched beneath his scarred cheek. But his voice, when he spoke, was perfectly calm. He was wrong. About all of it. Clara let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. Silas crossed the room slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to. He crouched down in front of her chair so that their eyes were level. Clara, he said quietly, I do not know everything that happened to you before you came here. I do not know what kind of man your husband was or what he did to make you so afraid. But I want you to know something. She waited, barely breathing. You are safe here, Silas said. I will never lay a hand on you in anger. I will never touch you without your permission. I will never come to your room at night. Whatever you need, whatever you want, you just have to tell me, and I will do my best to give it to you. And if you decide you want to leave, if this life is not what you hope for, I will put you on a stagecoach myself and pay your way to wherever you want to go." Clara stared at him. Her heart was pounding, but not from fear, from something else entirely. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do all that for me? You do not even know me." Silas held her gaze steadily. "Because you deserve it," he said simply. "Every person deserves to feel safe. And because Jeremiah asked me to take care of you, and I gave him my word means something." Clara felt something crack open inside her chest, something she had kept locked away for 7 long years. The tears came harder now, streaming down her face, dripping off her chin. No one had ever promised to protect her before. No one had ever looked at her like she mattered, like her comfort was worth sacrificing for, like her fear was a reasonable response to an unreasonable past, not a character flaw to be beaten out of her. "Thank you," she managed to choke out. "Thank you, Silas." He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she did not, he took her hand in his. His fingers were rough and calloused, warm and impossibly gentle. "You are welcome, Clara Boone," he said. "Welcome to your new home." That night, the sky turned black. Storm clouds rolled in from the mountains like a living thing, swallowing the stars one by one. Wind screamed across the prairie, bending the grass flat against the earth. Thunder boomed so loud the whole house shook on its foundation, rattling the windows in their frames. Clara sat alone by the fire, wrapped in one of the quilts from her bed, watching the flames dance, and trying not to flinch at every crash of thunder. She had always hated storms. They reminded her too much of the rages, the sudden violence that could erupt without warning, the way the air would change, growing heavy and electric with danger, before the blow finally fell. The front door banged open and Silas stumbled inside, soaked to the bone. Water dripped from his dark hair and pooled on the floor beneath his boots. His shirt clung to his broad shoulders, showing every hard line of muscle beneath the wet fabric. He had been out checking the fences, making sure the cattle were secure before the worst of the storm hit. He had been gone for hours, and Clara had been trying not to worry. "Lord Almighty," he muttered, wrestling the door closed against the wind. "That is going to be a bad one." He stripped off his wet coat and hung it by the fire to dry. Clara hurried to fetch him a towel, but when she held it out, her hands were trembling. Silas noticed. He always noticed everything. "You scared me today," he said quietly as he dried his hair. "Not because you fainted, but because I did not know how to help you. I do not know what to do when you are hurting, Clara. I was raised by soldiers and cattlemen. Nobody taught me how to be gentle." Clara looked down at her feet. The words came out before she could stop them. "Nobody ever cared enough to try to help before." Silas went very still. The fire crackled in the hearth. Rain lashed against the windows like angry fists. Lightning flickered, throwing strange shadows across the walls. And in that small, warm kitchen, something shifted between them. Something important. Something that could not be taken back. "Clara," Silas said softly, "what did he do to you?" The question cracked something open inside her. Something she had kept locked away in the darkest corner of her soul for 7 long years. Something that had festered in the silence, growing heavier with every passing day. She knew she should lie. She should protect herself. She should keep her secrets buried where they belonged, where they could not be used against her. But she was so tired of carrying them alone. "He came to my room every night." The words fell out of her like stones dropping into a well. Heavy, cold, final, irretrievable. "For 7 years, Edgar Morrison came to my room every night. He said it was his right as a husband. He said it was my duty as a wife. He said I should be grateful anyone wanted me at all." Silas's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists at his sides. "I learned to leave my body," Clara continued, her voice flat and distant, "to go somewhere else in my mind, somewhere safe, somewhere he could not reach. It was the only way to survive." She waited for the disgust, the blame, the cold disappointment that always followed confession. But instead, Silas Boone whispered something that shattered her completely. "You survived," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You did what you had to do to survive, and that makes you stronger than anyone I have ever met." Clara's eyes flew open. She had not realized she had closed them. Silas sat across from her in the firelight, this tall and scarred and battle-hardened man, and he looked like he was the one breaking. His dark eyes were bright with unshed tears. His whole body was trembling. "Clara," he continued softly, "I give you my solemn word before Gia and all his angels. I will never touch you without your permission. I will never take what is not freely given. I will never come to your room unless you invite me there yourself. Do you understand?" She stared at him. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat, in her wrists, behind her eyes. "Why are your hands shaking?" she whispered. Silas looked down at his fists. He had not noticed. Slowly, deliberately, he uncurled his fingers. "Because," he said quietly, "when you flinched away from me today, when you cried out and begged me not to hurt you, I realized how much pain you have lived through, and I realized how much I want to protect you from ever feeling that way again. The thought that someone hurt you like that, it makes me want to kill something, but I know that would not help. So instead I just shake." Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks, hot and silent, unstoppable. No man had ever trembled for her before. No man had ever looked at her like her pain mattered. No man had ever cared enough about her suffering to be moved by it. "I am broken," she whispered. "You should send me back. Find yourself a whole woman who can give you what you deserve." Silas leaned forward. His dark eyes held hers, steady and sure. "We are all broken, Clara. Every single one of us. I carry scars on my body and worse ones in my soul. I wake up screaming from nightmares about things I have done and things that were done to me. I am no more whole than you are." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentle as a prayer. "But maybe two broken people can help each other heal. Maybe we can take our jagged edges and fit them together into something new, something stronger than either of us alone." Clara closed her eyes. The words washed over her like warm water over old bruises, like medicine on wounds that had been festering for far too long. Outside, the storm raged against the walls. Lightning split the sky. Thunder shook the earth. Inside, something new was being born. "I would like that," Clara whispered. "I would like to try." Silas smiled. It was a small smile, barely a twitch of his lips, but it transformed his scarred face into something almost beautiful. "Then we will try together," he said, "one day at a time." The storm did not pass quickly. For 3 days, snow and ice battered the little ranch house. The wind howled like a wounded animal. The temperature dropped so low that ice formed on the inside of the windows. There was no escape, no town, no neighbors to visit. Just the two of them in this small log house, while nature tried to tear the world apart. But somehow the forced closeness did not feel suffocating. It felt like a gift. With nowhere to go and nothing to do but survive, Silas and Clara began to truly know each other. They talked for hours by the fire, sharing stories they had never told another soul. They played checkers and chess with a set his mother had brought from back east. They read aloud from the Bible and from a tattered book of poetry Clara found on a shelf. On the first night, Silas told her about his father. "He died when I was 10, he said, staring into the flames, thrown from a horse, broke his neck. I watched it happen from the porch." Clara reached out and touched his hand. "I am sorry. I used to think it was my fault. That if I had been faster, braver, I could have saved him somehow. I carried that guilt for years before my mother finally convinced me to let it go." Clara nodded slowly. "Guilt is a heavy thing to carry." "The heaviest," Silas agreed. "But you learn to set it down eventually, or it crushes you." On the second night, Clara told him about her mother. "She taught me to read in secret," she said softly. "My father did not approve of education for girls. He said it gave us ideas above our station. But my mother would sneak books into my room at night, and we would read together by candlelight." "That sounds beautiful." It was. She made me believe I could be anything, that I was worth something. She paused, her voice catching. "When she died, I lost that belief. It took years to find it again." Silas squeezed her hand gently. "You found it, though. You are here. You survived." Clara smiled through her tears. "I am beginning to believe that." On the third night, the temperature dropped so low that even the fire could not keep the house warm. Clara lay in her bed shivering, piling every blanket she could find on top of herself. but the cold seeped through the walls, through the quilts, through her very bones. Her teeth chattered. Her fingers went numb. She thought of Silas out in the barn, sleeping on the frozen ground, alone, suffering, and all because he wanted to give her space. Before she could talk herself out of it, she rose from the bed and walked to the front door. Silas was not in the barn. He was in the main room, huddled by the fire, wrapped in a single thin blanket. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. "You should be asleep," he said through chattering teeth. "So should you. But not out here, not in this cold." Silas shook his head. "I am fine. You need the bedroom." Clara took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding, but not from fear, from something else, something brave and fragile and new. "I need warmth," she said quietly. "And so do you. We will both freeze if we spend the night apart." Silas stared at her. The firelight played across his scarred face, making his expression hard to read. "Clara," he said carefully, "I do not want to make you uncomfortable." She crossed the room until she stood right in front of him. She reached down and took his cold hand in hers. "I am asking you to share a bed with me," she said. "Not for anything else, just for warmth, just for company. I do not want to be alone tonight." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he nodded once. All right, they went to the small bedroom together, the one Silas had been using. It had a narrow bed, barely big enough for two, but they made it work. They lay side by side under a pile of quilts, fully clothed, not touching at first. Clara stared at the ceiling, her body rigid with old fears. She had not shared a bed with a man since Edgar. She had sworn she never would again. But this was different. This was Silas. This was safe. Slowly, her muscles began to relax. "Can I ask you something?" Silas's voice came soft through the darkness. "Yes. When you came here, when you stepped off that stagecoach, what were you hoping to find?" Clara thought about the question. Really thought about it. "Safety," she said finally. "That is all I wanted, a place where I could close my eyes without being afraid of what would happen when I opened them. Have you found it?" Clara turned her head to look at him. In the darkness, she could barely make out the shape of his face, but she could feel his warmth beside her, could hear his steady breathing, could smell the clean scent of him, wood smoke and soap and something uniquely his. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I have." Silas let out a long breath. His hand found hers under the quilts. Good. They lay there in silence for a while, listening to the wind rage outside. The house creaked and groaned. Ice crackled against the windows. Clara found herself whispering again. "When you carried me today, and I panicked, when I was crying and begging you not to hurt me, I was not really afraid of you. I was afraid of the memory, of being trapped in my own past." "I know," Silas said quietly. "I recognize that look. I have seen it in the mirror." Clara squeezed his hand. "You have nightmares too. Every night. Sometimes I wake up and I do not know where I am. Sometimes I reach for a weapon that is not there. Sometimes I hear screams that are only in my head." "I am sorry," Clara whispered. "Do not be. It is just part of who I am now. The war, the Comanche, the bounty hunting, they changed me in ways I can never undo. But maybe that is all right. Maybe I can be something new instead of trying to go back to what I was before." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Two broken people," she murmured, "with jagged edges, fitting together," Silas finished, "into something stronger." She lifted his hand to her lips and kissed his knuckles. A simple gesture, an offering of trust. "I will spend the rest of my life giving you new memories," Silas said softly. "Good ones, safe ones, if you will let me." Clara smiled in the darkness. "I will let you." They talked until dawn, still holding hands, sharing the warmth of their bodies and their souls. And when the first gray light crept through the frost-covered window, neither of them had slept a wink. But neither of them minded. The blizzard finally passed on the fourth morning. Clara woke to find herself warm, warmer than she had ever been in her entire life. Silas's arm was around her waist, her back pressed against his chest, his breath stirring her hair with each slow, steady exhale. For one breathless, terrifying moment, she lay completely still, waiting for the panic to strike, waiting for the memories to drag her back to that dark place. They did not come. Instead, she felt something she had never felt before. Safety, protection, belonging. She closed her eyes and let herself feel it. Really, truly feel it. The warmth of his body against hers, the solid strength of his arm around her waist, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat at her back. For the first time since she could remember, she was not afraid to exist in her own body. When Silas stirred awake behind her, she felt him go rigid with realization. His arms started to pull back, embarrassment, apology. Clara caught his hand before he could retreat. "Do not," she whispered. "Please, just a little longer." Silas relaxed against her. His arms settled back around her waist, loose and gentle. His chin came to rest on the top of her head. They lay like that for a long time, watching the sunrise paint the frost-covered window in shades of pink and gold. The world outside sparkled white and clean, like it had been washed new in the night. And in the quiet of that narrow bed, wrapped in warmth and safety, in something that felt dangerously like love, Clara knew with absolute certainty. She had found her home. The days that followed were the happiest Clara had known since childhood. She fell into a rhythm with Silas that felt as natural as breathing. He worked the cattle and mended fences and split wood for the rest of the long winter. She cooked and cleaned and finished preparing the garden for spring. They met for meals and talked for hours and gradually, carefully, learned the shape of each other's hearts. Silas began to smile more. The hard lines around his mouth softened. He laughed at her jokes, a deep, warm rumble that made something flutter in her chest every time she heard it. Clara began to smile too. She caught herself humming while she worked, songs her mother used to sing. She started wearing her hair down sometimes, the way she had as a girl before everything went wrong. She began to look in the mirror without flinching at what she saw there. They were healing each other, day by day, moment by moment, one small kindness at a time. One evening in early December, Silas took her hand during supper, just reached across the table and wrapped his rough fingers around hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. Clara looked up at him, startled. "I have been thinking," he said slowly, "about us, about what we are to each other." Clara's heart began to pound. "And what have you concluded? That I do not want to sleep in separate rooms anymore." Clara's breath caught. "Silas, I am not sure I am ready for—" He squeezed her hand gently. "Not for that," he said quickly. "Not until you want to. Maybe not ever, if that is what you need. I just want to be near you, to hold you through the night, to wake up and know you are there." Clara felt tears sting her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "I would like that," she whispered. That night, for the first time since she arrived, Silas did not go to the barn or the small bedroom. He came to the big room that had been his mother's. Their room now. They lay together under the patchwork quilt, Clara's head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her. They talked softly in the darkness about nothing and everything. Dreams they had given up on. Hopes they were afraid to name. The small, precious moments that made life worth living. And when Clara finally fell asleep, she was smiling. The weeks turned into a month, then two. Christmas came and went, quiet but sweet. Silas had carved her a wooden jewelry box, each side decorated with flowers and stars. Clara had sewn him a new shirt from fabric she had found in his mother's sewing basket. They ate goose for dinner and drank cider by the fire and fell asleep in each other's arms. It was the best Christmas either of them had ever had. By late January, Clara knew something had changed inside her. At first, she thought she was getting sick. The morning nausea, the bone-deep exhaustion, the way certain smells suddenly made her want to retch. Then she realized the truth. She was late. She was never late. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, hands pressed to her stomach, trying to comprehend what her body was telling her. A baby. After everything she had been through, after all the years of Edgar's cruelty, she had never conceived. She had begun to believe she could not. But now, with Silas, it had happened. She was going to be a mother. The fear came first, cold and familiar and paralyzing. A baby meant vulnerability. A baby meant she could never truly escape if things went wrong. A baby meant her body would no longer be her own. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Something warm and powerful and fierce. Joy. She waited until evening to tell him. They were sitting by the fire after supper, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. The perfect moment. "Silas," she said softly. I need to tell you something." He must have heard something in her voice because he shifted to look at her face. His dark eyes were worried. "What is it? Are you all right?" Clara took his hand and pressed it gently to her stomach. "We are going to have a baby." For a long, long moment, Silas did not move, did not breathe, did not blink. Then his face crumpled. "A baby?" His voice cracked on the word, breaking like ice in spring. "Our baby?" "Yes," Clara whispered. "Ours." Silas pulled her into his arms so carefully, so gently, like she was made of spun glass that might shatter at the slightest pressure. He pressed his forehead to hers and laughed, a shaky, breathless sound full of wonder and disbelief. "I never thought," he managed, "I never thought a man like me could have something this good. A wife who loves me, a child, a family." Clara cupped his scarred face in her hands. "You deserve every good thing, Silas Boone," she said fiercely. "Every single one. Do not ever let yourself believe otherwise." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying, both of them were smiling. "We are going to be a family," Silas said wonderingly. "A real family." "Yes," Clara agreed, "the realest kind." For 3 precious weeks, they lived in a bubble of happiness. Silas built a cradle from oak wood, carving flowers and stars into the sides, just like the jewelry box he had made for Christmas. He ordered soft fabric from town for baby clothes. He read aloud to Clara's stomach every night, old stories his mother used to tell him, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. Clara grew round and content. The morning sickness passed and her appetite returned. She glowed with a quiet happiness that transformed her from pretty to radiant. She caught Silas staring at her sometimes, his dark eyes soft with wonder, and she felt like the most beautiful woman in the world. They talked about the future, about names for the baby, about expanding the house when money allowed, about growing old together on this land, surrounded by children and grandchildren in love. It seemed too good to be true. It was. The warning came on a gray February morning, carried by a grizzled old man named Pete, who ran the trading post 20 miles south. He rode up to the ranch house just after dawn, his horse lathered with sweat despite the cold, his weathered face grim with worry. "Silas," he called out, "need to talk to you. Private-like." Clara watched from the window as the 2 men walked toward the barn, their heads bent together. She saw Silas's shoulders stiffen, saw his hands curl into fists, saw the darkness cloud his eyes like storm clouds covering the sun. When Pete rode away, Silas stood frozen in the yard for a long time, just standing there, staring at nothing, his whole body rigid with tension. Finally, he walked back to the house. Each step was slow and heavy, like his boots were filled with lead. Clara met him at the door, her heart already pounding with dread. "What is it?" she asked. "What is wrong?" Silas pulled her inside and closed the door firmly behind them. He took both her hands in his and looked into her eyes. "A man came through Pete's trading post yesterday," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "asking questions, looking for a woman named Clara who ran away from Ohio about 3 months ago." Clara's blood turned to ice in her veins. "He was traveling with 3 other men," Silas continued. "They were well armed and well supplied. Pete said they looked like trouble." "What did the man look like?" Clara's voice came out as a whisper. "Big fellow, dark hair slicked back, mean little eyes, had a scar on his chin, said his name was Morrison." The world tilted. Clara grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling. Her vision went gray at the edges. Her stomach heaved. "Samuel," she gasped. "Samuel Morrison, who is he, Clara?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with dread. Clara closed her eyes. She had known this day would come, had dreamed about it in her worst nightmares, had prayed that she would be wrong, that she had escaped cleanly, that the past would stay buried where she had left it. But the past never stayed buried. It always found a way to claw its way back to the surface. "He is my dead husband's cousin," she said, her voice hollow and distant. "Edgar owed him money, a lot of money. And when Edgar died, Samuel claimed that I was part of the debt." Silas's jaw tightened. "Claimed you? Like property?" Clara nodded miserably. "He came to the funeral, tried to take me that very night. He said Edgar had promised him that if anything happened, he could have me, like I was a horse or a piece of furniture." "What did you do?" I ran. She opened her eyes and looked at Silas. I grabbed what money I could find, and I ran. Jeremiah helped me disappear, helped me find a new life far away from everything I had known. I thought I was safe. I thought Samuel would give up eventually. But he did not give up. No, he did not. Clara sank into a chair, her legs too weak to hold her. She pressed her hands to her swollen belly, where their child grew. He will not stop, she said. He is a proud man, a cruel man. He will never accept that I escaped him. He will hunt me to the ends of the earth. Silas crouched down in front of her. He took her face in his rough, gentle hands and made her look at him. Then we will be ready for him. Clara shook her head. You do not understand. Samuel was a captain in the war. He knows how to fight, how to kill, and he has men with him. You cannot stand against all of them alone. I will not be alone. Silas stood and walked to the gun cabinet in the corner of the room. He unlocked it and pulled out 3 rifles, 2 pistols, and a shotgun. Jack Collins lives on the spread 10 miles east, he said, checking each weapon with practiced efficiency. He rode with me in the bounty hunting days. He owes me his life 3 times over. He will come when I call. Silas. Clara. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were hard as flint. I spent years hunting men for money. Dangerous men. Desperate men. Men who would have killed me without blinking if I gave them half a chance. I survived because I was smarter and faster and meaner than any of them. He set the guns down on the table and crossed to where she sat. Samuel Morrison has no idea what he is riding into, he said quietly. No idea at all. He thinks he is coming to collect a debt. What he is really coming to collect is a grave. Clara looked up at the man she had married, the scarred rancher with the gentle hands and the dark, violent past. The man who had held her through nightmares and kissed her tears away. The man who had given her a home, a family, a future worth fighting for. I love you, she whispered. Silas smiled, a cold, hard smile that did not reach his eyes. I love you too, Clara, and I will kill any man who tries to take you from me. Silas spent the next 3 days preparing for war. He sent word to Jack Collins, who arrived the very next morning with 2 rifles and a grim expression on his weathered face. Jack was a lean, quiet man with gray streaking his beard and scars on his hands from a lifetime of violence. He and Silas had been partners in the bounty hunting days, tracking dangerous men across the frontier for reward money. They spoke little but understood each other perfectly. Silas boarded up the windows on the ground floor. He reinforced the doors with iron bars. He dug rifle pits in strategic locations around the property. He made sure Clara knew how to use every gun in the house, drilling her until she could load and fire without thinking. Clara did not argue. She did not cry. She did not beg him to run away with her. She simply rolled up her sleeves and did what needed to be done. On the 4th night, the dog started barking. Clara woke instantly, her heart pounding. Beside her, Silas was already out of bed, reaching for the rifle he kept within arm's reach. They are here, he said quietly. Get dressed. Stay low. Do not leave the house unless I tell you to. Clara threw on her clothes with shaking hands. She grabbed the shotgun from beside the bed and checked that it was loaded. 12 gauge, 2 barrels. Enough stopping power to knock a man down at close range. She had never shot anyone before. She prayed she would not have to tonight. But if it came down to her child's life or Samuel Morrison's, she knew which one she would choose. Silas moved through the dark house like a ghost, checking windows, positioning himself for the best line of fire. Outside, the dogs continued to bark, their voices rising in pitch and urgency. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats, many hoofbeats, coming fast from the south. Clara, Silas called from the front room. I need you here. She crossed to him on silent feet. He was crouched by the window, peering through a crack in the boards. In the moonlight, she could see riders approaching. 4 of them, fanning out to surround the house. There, Silas pointed. That one in the front, is that him? Clara looked. Her stomach heaved. Yes, she whispered. That is Samuel. He looked exactly as she remembered. Big and broad, sitting his horse like he owned the world. Dark hair slicked back from his face. Mean little eyes that glittered in the moonlight. He was smiling, the confident smile of a man who always got what he wanted. Silas checked his rifle one more time. Stay behind me, he said. No matter what happens, do not come outside unless I call for you. Clara grabbed his arm. "Come back to me." He turned and kissed her, hard and fast and full of promise. "Always," he said. Then he opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. Clara watched through the crack in the boards, her heart in her throat. "Samuel Morrison," Silas called out. His voice carried across the cold night air, steady and clear. "You are trespassing on my land. Turn around and ride away, and I will let you live." Samuel laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You must be the fool who took my property," he called back. "Did she tell you what she really is? A bought woman, a debt to be collected. She belongs to me by right." "She is my wife," Silas replied, "the mother of my child. And if you say one more word about her, I will put a bullet between your eyes." Samuel's smile faltered. He glanced at his men, then back at the lone figure standing on the porch. "There are 4 of us," he said, "and 1 of you. Think carefully about your next move, rancher." Silas raised his rifle. "You are wrong," he said. "There are 3 of us." As if on cue, Jack Collins opened fire from the barn. One of Samuel's men screamed and toppled from his horse, clutching his shoulder. Chaos erupted. The remaining riders scattered, seeking cover. Gunfire cracked through the night from multiple directions. Bullets slammed into the walls of the house, punching holes in the wooden boards. Clara dropped to the floor, her hands pressed over her ears, her whole body shaking. The noise was deafening. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. She heard Silas firing from the porch, steady and controlled. Heard Jack's rifle barking from the barn. Heard men shouting and horses screaming and the terrible thud of bodies hitting the ground. Then she heard something that made her blood freeze. Footsteps on the back porch. Someone was circling around, coming for the back door. Clara grabbed her shotgun and moved silently toward the kitchen. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Her hands were slick with sweat. She pressed herself against the wall beside the back door and waited. The door burst open. Samuel Morrison came through low and fast, a pistol in his hand. He swept the room with his gun, searching for targets. His eyes found Clara. "There you are," he said, smiling that terrible smile. "Time to come home, pretty girl." Clara raised the shotgun. "I am home." She pulled the trigger. The blast caught Samuel in the shoulder, spinning him around, slamming him into the doorframe. His pistol went flying. Blood sprayed across the white kitchen walls. But he did not go down. He lunged for her, his good hand reaching for her throat, his face twisted with rage. Clara tried to dodge, but she was slow. Too slow. His fingers closed around her arm, yanking her toward him. "Should have just come quietly," he snarled. "Now I am going to make you pay for every mile you made me ride." Clara screamed. Silas appeared in the doorway behind Samuel, his rifle raised. "Let her go." Samuel spun, dragging Clara in front of him like a shield. His bloody hand found her throat. "Shoot me and you will hit her," he said. "Put down the gun." Silas hesitated. His eyes met Clara's, full of anguish. "Do it," Clara gasped. "Do not let him take me. I cannot risk hitting you." "The baby," Samuel laughed. "The baby?" He looked down at Clara's swollen belly. "Oh, this just keeps getting better." "You are breeding? And here I thought you were barren." His grip tightened on her throat. Clara could feel her air being cut off, could feel darkness creeping at the edges of her vision. She had one chance. With all her strength, she drove her elbow back into Samuel's wounded shoulder. He screamed and his grip loosened for just a second. Clara dropped to the floor. Silas fired twice. Both bullets found their mark. Samuel Morrison crumpled to the ground and did not move again. Clara lay on the cold wooden floor, gasping for breath, her whole body shaking. Her throat burned. Her lungs ached. But she was alive. Then Silas was there, pulling her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "It is over," he whispered. "It is over, Clara. You are safe." She clung to him and sobbed. Outside, the last of Samuel's men fled into the darkness. Jack Collins let them go. There had been enough killing for one night. The battle was won. Spring came slowly to Wyoming that year. The snow melted in patches, revealing the brown grass beneath. The creek behind the house swelled with meltwater, then settled into its gentle summer flow. Birds returned from wherever birds go in winter, filling the air with song. And Clara grew round with the life inside her. The doctor from town had come the morning after the battle, summoned by Jack Collins. He examined Clara thoroughly and pronounced both her and the baby healthy, though he warned them to take it easy for the remainder of the pregnancy. No more excitement, he said sternly. Rest, good food, peace and quiet. Silas had nodded grimly and spent the next 3 months making sure Clara wanted for nothing. He hired a woman from town to help with the housework. He bought chickens and a milk cow so Clara would have fresh eggs and cream. He finished the cradle he had started, sanding the wood until it was as smooth as silk, painting it white with blue flowers around the edges. Clara watched him work and fell more in love with him every day. The baby came in late June, on the longest day of the year. Clara had been feeling strange all morning. A dull ache in her lower back, a tightness in her belly that came and went. By noon, she knew what was happening. Silas rode for the doctor while the hired woman helped Clara to bed. The pains grew stronger, closer together, more intense than anything Clara had ever experienced. But beneath the pain, there was something else. Joy. She was bringing new life into the world. A life created from love, not violence. A child who would grow up knowing only kindness. The baby came just as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. A boy. Red-faced and howling and absolutely perfect. The doctor cleaned him up and placed him in Clara's arms. She looked down at that tiny face, those tiny fingers, and felt her heart crack open in a way she had not known was possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I have been waiting for you." Silas burst through the door a moment later, having nearly killed 2 horses getting back from town. He skidded to a stop in the bedroom doorway, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. Then he saw them. His wife, his son, his face crumpled. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and sank to his knees beside the bed. His hands were shaking as he reached out to touch the baby's cheek. "A boy," Clara said softly. "A healthy boy." Silas looked up at her. Tears were streaming down his scarred face, catching in the stubble on his chin. "James," he whispered. "James Thomas Boone." Clara smiled. "After your father. After the man who taught me that a father's love should be the safest place in the world." He paused, his voice breaking. "I will spend my whole life making sure this boy knows that kind of safety." Clara reached out and touched his face. "I know you will," she said. "I know." Later that night, when the doctor had gone and the hired woman had retired to her room, Silas sat beside Clara on the bed. Their newborn son slept against her chest, his tiny fist curled around her finger. The fire crackled low in the hearth. Stars spread across the Wyoming sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "What are you thinking?" Silas whispered. Clara leaned into him, her heart so full it ached. "I am thinking that I never knew life could be this good," she said. "Not after everything I have been through. Not after everything I have lost. I am thinking that I must be dreaming, and I am afraid to wake up." Silas kissed her forehead gently, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, warm and protective and sure. "This is real," he said. "You and me and James. Our family, our home. Nothing is going to take that away from us. Not ever again." Clara smiled through her tears. She thought about the girl she had been 4 years ago. Frightened, abused, alone in the world, believing she would never know love or safety or peace. That girl felt like a stranger now. The woman holding her newborn son was different, stronger, braver, forged in fire and tempered by love. She had survived Edgar's cruelty. She had survived Samuel's pursuit. She had survived the long, dark years of fear and pain and despair. And she had come out the other side into something beautiful. Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a ring, simple gold, worn smooth by years of use. "This was my mother's," he said quietly. "She wore it every day until she died. She told me once that I should give it to the woman who finally made this house a home again." He took Clara's hand and slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. "I love you, Clara Boone," Silas said. "More than I ever knew I could love anything. You gave me back my hope. You gave me a reason to keep going. You gave me a family." Clara cupped his face in her free hand. "And you gave me everything," she whispered. "A home, a future, a safe place to land. I will spend the rest of my life grateful for the day you agreed to take me in." They sat together in the firelight, their sleeping son between them, and let the peace of the moment wash over them. Outside, the wind whispered through the prairie grass. The moon rose full and bright over the mountains. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote sang its wild song. But inside, a family held each other close. No longer haunted, no longer running, no longer broken. Just Silas and Clara and James. Three hearts beating as one. A family built not from fear or obligation or ownership. A family built from fierce, stubborn, unbreakable love. As Clara drifted towards sleep, her baby warm in her arms and her husband's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had finally found what she had been searching for her entire life. Not just safety, not just shelter, home. And she would spend every day of the rest of her life grateful for the second chance she had been given. For the scarred rancher who had seen past her fear and loved her anyway. For the child who represented everything good that still existed in the world. Some people searched their whole lives for happiness and never found it. Clara Henderson Boone had found hers on a dusty Wyoming prairie, in the arms of a man the world had written off as broken. Together they had proven the world wrong. Together they had built something beautiful from the ruins of their pasts. Together they had found their forever home.